And obviously you should try to make every piece you create as good as you can, but it will never be perfect. It will never be as good as it could be, but is it as good as you can make it right now? I think that we inherently are great, but as, just throughout life, whether it is conditioning, family, society, we pile on so many limiting beliefs and false assumptions and unrealistic expectations and waiting for other people to give us permission to do the thing. I think that we are naturally great, but we hold ourselves back from being great. I looked back and identified what are the most common limiting beliefs that damn near everybody seems to struggle with, whether they're just beginning their creator journey all the way up to best-selling authors. And most limiting beliefs fell into one of four categories, which were...
For today's episode, I am joined by Dr. Corey Wilks, who is a psychologist and executive coach helping creators and entrepreneurs escape mediocrity and build extraordinary lives and businesses. Corey, great to have you here today, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So a lot of your work is on imposter syndrome, right? This feeling of not being good enough, not having enough credentials, not being enough of an expert. And this is really a big thing holding a lot of creators back. What's a way for people to really navigate imposter syndrome?
I actually like to think of it less as imposter syndrome and more as like liminal tension. So a liminal space is basically just like the space between two things. So it's like a hallway is a liminal space between two rooms, okay? A lot of times the thing we call imposter syndrome is the tension we feel when we're entering a new space. So because like fundamentally imposter syndrome is the belief that you don't belong in the room. So as soon as you try to enter that room, that's when you feel that tension, that resistance, because you're like, oh, I don't belong here because everybody else in this room, they're real entrepreneurs, or they're smarter than me, or they're somehow better than me. Who am I to enter this room? But for me, that's actually a good thing because that liminal tension is an indicator you're actually pushing your growth edges. You're actually pushing yourself to enter new rooms, to try new things, to level up. Because the reality is, man, I've worked with, some of the biggest creators out there. And I remember I was having lunch with a creator and we were talking about imposter syndrome. Because I was like, look, I'm going to, start creating content targeted toward much higher level creators rather than beginners. So for example, I wouldn't talk about imposter syndrome. And he was like, why? I have imposter syndrome, and so does everybody I know. I was like, dude, you're the reason other people have imposter syndrome. How do you have imposter syndrome? Right? And I think that's just the reality of it is if you are constantly trying to grow and level up and push yourself, that tension is just going to be part of your day-to-day life. So learning to see it as a signal that you are growing rather than a sign you need to back off is really important.
That's really interesting because it's like a reframe of imposter syndrome. Rather than seeing it as something negative, like as something is wrong with me, you're basically reframing it as, hey, this is actually a compass for action. It's a sign that I'm moving into the right direction. Like this is basically my next question would actually be like, is it something that ever goes away? But I guess you just answered that. And because I'm asking because I noticed myself that I've never really had imposter syndrome in terms of like getting started as a creator. But I noticed that for me, imposter syndrome really creeps in the moment I'm reaching out to, let's say, another entrepreneur who has 10x the size or 10x the revenue of my business. That's when I'm like, those thoughts of imposter syndrome creep in. In that scenario specifically, how would you navigate imposter syndrome there?
When it comes to outreach and collaboration?
For example, yeah.
So in college, I joined a fraternity. And one of the biggest things that we learned in the fraternity was that every member, no matter what their station was, no matter if they were an undergrad who had just pledged and joined, or they were the 60-year-old CEO of the entire international organization, at the end of the day, they were all just your brother. And you were all equal in that brotherhood. And I've taken that concept and applied it outside of my fraternity. So when I meet somebody, whether they are a best-selling author or a 100 million, sub YouTuber or whatever, I don't, and this is easier said than done, but I don't look at them. I don't see their metrics over top of their head. Like, I'm not like, oh shit, they have 300,000 Instagram followers, right? I don't see that because I'm not looking for that. I'm looking past all of that to look at the human in front of me, because that's the person I'm trying to connect with. I'm not trying to connect to the 300K Instagram account. I'm trying to connect to the individual person on an individual human level. That for me makes it far less intimidating because I'm just reaching out to another person.
I think that's really a good way to approach it, right? Because it's like, I found as well that whenever I would reach out to someone, let's say with 5 times the audience size, and initially I would feel that resistance maybe, but I would always still do it. I have a rule that I always do it, even though I feel whatever, like imposter syndrome or perfectionism or any of those things creep in. I just like do it because it's almost like exposure therapy, where you take the action and most cases you actually get a positive result from it. And that's kind of how you rewire something like imposter syndrome. And specifically in these cases, right, I would reach out to other creators and they'd be so fun to work with and it would actually become like friends. So rather than seeing the external metrics maybe and getting intimidated by that, even intimidated by the personal brand, it's like look through all of that and look at like the human you're trying to reach.
That, and I think that, as creators, we have, so, and by creator, because sometimes the term creator is polarizing. When I say creator, I mean, if you create something, you are a creator, right? So whether you are a solopreneur, coach, writer, YouTuber, podcaster, marketer, or whatever, if you create, you're a creator. I don't just mean, a vapid influencer or something. Okay. But as a creator, you have a really good opportunity to connect with so many people, because if you create good content, that works as your portfolio, right? Because a lot of these people you're hitting up probably get hit up by a lot of other people. What a lot of them do, these quote unquote bigger accounts, is if you hit them up, they will look into you. So they'll click on your page, they'll go to your website, they'll see, they'll look at your feed, whatever, and they'll say, oh, does this person engage in a certain level of thoughtful content or critical thinking or just nuanced ideas that I want to kind of be part of my life? As a creator, that's what you do. You're constantly building your portfolio, right? Every single piece of content is an asset in your portfolio. So as long as you're creating good stuff, it is much easier to reach out to these quote unquote bigger accounts, because they're going to look at that and be like, oh shit, they have really good stuff. Like, this is a quality person because they have quality thinking and create quality content. They are focused on building authority and trust and authenticity. That's the kind of person I want to be around. So it actually makes it a lot easier, because people can just check out your stuff without you having to do this big, long pitch, right? They can see how you think. They can see your personality, hopefully. And if they can't, then your content probably sucks.
That's a good point. Now, what about that type of like imposter syndrome where someone is, and I see this with a lot of people in our audience, right? They actually have quite some expertise on a topic. Then they want to, let's say, start a Substack newsletter around that. But then they're like, last second, they don't hit that publish button because they're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm like expert enough, or I think I might need some more credentials before I start posting. What about that type of imposter syndrome?
If you are writing as yourself about something you care about to a specific person, those are really the 3 ingredients you need. Okay. Everything else is either just, minutia or something you can learn. So, because if you think about like your favorite pieces of writing probably weren't the most academically rigorous. They probably couldn't have passed a peer review process. They may not have even had a lot of, citations or some shit, but they felt deeply human. They resonated with you on an individual level. So we know what good writing looks like, but yet when we try to write, the biggest mistake we do is we try to write to our critics, not our audience. And what I mean by that is, so when I first started writing, I started back during COVID, like on Medium, and every time I would try to write, I'd be like, okay, I'm a psychologist. I have like the bar is really high. I can't, you know, I have to be super detailed with every single thing because somebody maybe someday somewhere could misconstrue it and harm themselves or something. Okay. So I have this, high bar. As I write this piece out, I'm like, okay, I had this really, really critical supervisor in grad school. I have to write it in such a way that she couldn't pick it apart. Let me give it another caveat. Let me find a quick source to put in here. Well, let me just make it a little bit longer. I need another example. And the piece bloated so much that it was awful because I was no longer writing to the people I was actually trying to serve. I was writing to try to placate one critic of many. So that's one piece, is we're so concerned with what our critics might say. We're so afraid of that judgment, that criticism, that we lose the whole point of creating in the first place, right? You don't create for your critics, you create for your audience. So that's one piece. The other thing is, most of us are waiting for permission. We think, oh, I am not ready and I don't feel ready. I need somebody else to tell me it's okay for me to publish this idea. We say, oh, what do you think about this? Oh, what about this? What would you do here? We're waiting for permission to share ourselves and our ideas with the world. And then the third piece is that we try to make especially early on, we try to make every piece the magnum opus, the ultimate guide, the be all end all. So we get scope creep, right? Where you start off with like a really good, like tight idea, and then you just slowly build and build and build as if you're trying to make the ultimate guide to that thing, to the point that it's just like, this is unwieldy. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I can no longer put this out because the more I try to make it robust, the more the scope creeps. So these are the biggest issues I see that consistently hold people back when it comes to, you may have actual expertise. And even if you don't have traditional expertise, you are an expert at your life and your experiences, right? Like, we have like the archetype of like the old sage person, the old hermit who's super wise. Maybe they didn't go to college, maybe they don't have whatever, but they have a lot of wisdom. They are an expert on living. You are an expert on living your life at the very least. You have something to share with people, okay? But a lot of these obstacles we run into typically boil down to fear. We're afraid of failing. Oh, what if it isn't good enough? What if I'm not smart enough? What if I don't make the right point and somebody finds flaws in it? We're afraid of ridicule or judgment, criticism. What will people think? What will my friends and family say if I hit publish? Well, I still have a job, part-time or full-time, whatever. What if my boss sees this? What if my colleagues find out I'm trying to be a writer? Who do I think I am to try to even call myself a writer? I'm not a real writer. We're afraid of uncertainty, which is basically where you say, I'm not ready. Let me do more research. Let me read another book on writing. Let me take another course on how to do the thing. I need to prepare more because I don't want to go off half-cocked. I don't want to make the wrong decision. And the fourth one is fear of success, which sounds weird at first because you're like, why would I be afraid to achieve the thing I claim to want? But for a lot of us, success represents crossing a threshold. If you've never achieved major success, however you define it, then you've only known the pre-success version of yourself and your life. So achieving success means becoming something different. And we reflexively sort of back away from things that feel like alien or foreign to us, unknown to us. The thing I constantly hear from people is like, well, who have fear of success? It's like, well, I've been the underdog my entire life. If I succeed, I won't be the underdog. And I'm afraid to lose that grittiness as my superpower. Or I've heard other people say, well, if I succeed, that might mean I end up alone because my friends and family may leave me because of my ambition or because I've succeeded so much. So then we get all this scope creep. We do this, we wait for permission. All of these are typically because we're afraid to just put ourselves and our ideas out there.
How can someone listening to this right now identify which of these 4 fears is holding them back at this moment?
Well, based on the description I just gave, right? So I call these the 4 horsemen of fear: fear of failure, ridicule, uncertainty, success. So based on these, right? Fear of failure often whispers things like, what if I'm not good enough? What if this doesn't work out? So if those are the thoughts that kind of whisper in the back of your head, probably fear of failure. Fear of ridicule is often, what will other people think or say? So if that is what's going on, or even, who am I to do this? Right? Imposter syndrome is often rooted in like fear of ridicule, one of the horsemen. Uncertainty basically is, I don't know enough yet. I need to go research more. I need to go learn more. I need to go practice more before I do this thing. Before I hit publish, I need to go read on writing again, or I need to read, nobody wants to read your shit again, right? Whatever the classics are for writing. I need to do that before I put it out. Perfectionism is like, oh, it isn't good enough yet. I need to tinker on it some more, right? Fear of success is, it typically whispers things like, what is on the other side of success? What if somehow succeeding is bad? What if I lose my ambition? What if I become corrupted by power and influence? What if I end up alone? So depending on what thoughts and sort of self-doubts and insecurities swirl around in the back of your head, right when you get to the point of starting to hit publish or even considering putting yourself and your ideas out there, looking at what are the specific thoughts that are coming up, that'll give you a better idea of which of the horsemen you're probably struggling with. And this is a skill called metacognition. It sounds fancy. Metacognition is just what psychologists call like thinking about thinking. So just bringing your awareness to your thoughts. So just being aware of like, oh, what thoughts come up when I think about hitting publish, or when I think about publicly calling myself a writer, or when I think about starting my own business and doing the creator thing. What comes up? What swirls around the back of my head? That's metacognition, just bringing your awareness to that.
Really bringing awareness to, hey, I'm about to hit publish, but something is holding me back right now. Some inner voices are telling me things, and becoming aware of what that exactly is. Maybe journal a bit about it, but awareness is really the first, right? Without awareness, you cannot change it.
Exactly. Yeah, like until you know the why, you can't know the how. And by that, I mean, until you know why you're doing something, you can't really know how or what the best way to go about rectifying it is. So that metacognition, bring that awareness up, helps you at least identify, oh, this is what's causing everything else. Based on this, where do we go from here?
So we talked a little bit about the why, but what about the how? How can someone move from, okay, I kind of identified what I'm struggling with. Now, how can I actually solve it?
I think about it less as solving, so much as either integrating or coexisting. A lot of people who come to me, whether it is for private coaching, the community I run, the cohorts I run, other things, most of them have taken all the productivity courses, read all the books, they've memorized all the productivity hacks. They know how to do Pomodoro, Eisenhower, Pareto, all sorts of shit. Yet, they're still struggling. Most of the time, things like perfectionism, procrastination, shiny object syndrome, these are things that the productivity space attempts to address. But the productivity space basically says the reason you don't get more done is because you don't know how to get more done. So we're going to teach you how to get more done. The reality for most of us is that you know how to get shit done, but there's a mental block preventing you from getting shit done. For example, let's take procrastination. This is what so many people go to productivity space for. I keep pushing off deadlines. I keep kicking the can down the road until next week. I'll hit publish next week. I'll start the LLC next month, whatever. You've tried the Eisenhower matrix. You've tried all the other things, and they just, none of them are helping you specifically with procrastination. Most likely at that point, the reason is that you procrastinate because you are afraid. You are afraid that when you hit publish, people are going to judge you, or that nobody's going to read it, or that it's going to suck, or something else. Well, at that point, procrastination is actually helping you because it's helping you avoid a fear coming true. It's like, oh, well, what if everybody judges me? Okay, I'm not ready yet. Let me just, you know what? I got super busy this week with just random, I don't even know what, but I got super busy. Trust me, I promise I got busy. I'll do it next week. That's why the productivity stuff isn't working for you. If it hasn't, you're probably afraid. So for me, I start with another psychobabble term called a functional analysis. Sounds fancy, really isn't. All it means is you look at a given behavior and you say, what function does it have? What purpose does it serve? So like for me, typically when I feel myself start to like procrastinate, or like drag my feet or tinker too long on a piece, I'm like, okay, what might this behavior be helping me avoid? Damn near every time, the answer is, oh, it's helping me avoid something I'm afraid of. I'm afraid this isn't going to be good enough. I'm afraid people are going to judge it, or something else. I'm afraid I don't know enough yet. That's why I'm doing this stuff. Okay. And obviously you should try to make every piece you create as good as you can, but it will never be perfect. It will never be as good as it could be, but is it as good as you can make it right now? So that's my thing of, as far as like figuring out how do you move beyond that, or move through all this. The first step is really looking at, what is the function of the stuff I'm doing? Why am I so avoidant? What function does this serve? Once you figure that out, you'd be like, oh, okay, I'm afraid of this failing. Okay, cool. Let's assume you actually fail. I call this fear inoculation. Let's assume you actually fail. What does failure look like? Really, flesh it out. Paint a picture. What does failure really look like? Okay, worst case scenario. Okay, well, let's assume that comes true. What would you do then? How would you recover? How would you learn from, take those lessons learned and move forward? And what you find every single time is that whatever your worst case scenario is, it's survivable. And as soon as you realize, oh shit, it isn't nearly as bad as I thought it was, because even if my worst case scenario comes true, I will survive, I will recover, I will adapt, I will be back even stronger with more hard-earned knowledge and wisdom. Well, then the thing isn't nearly as terrifying. And because it isn't nearly as terrifying, you no longer need to avoid it happening in the first place. So now you don't need to procrastinate. You don't need shiny object syndrome to try to help you avoid it. So that's my thing. Figuring out why you're doing what you're doing, typically fear avoidance, identifying what is the thing I'm trying to avoid, what is this fear, staring that in the face and like really digging into like, okay, what is this worst case scenario? Let me really flesh this out. And then let me think about what life looks like after my worst case scenario happens, so that I can realize I have a plan now, I'm prepared, and I can handle it even if it happens. But now the likelihood that it happens, super low, because now you've seen it, you can anticipate it, you've got a plan to avoid it. But even if it happens, it's really not that bad. Now a lot of this other shit starts to go away. Because from a functional analysis perspective, humans don't do things that don't serve a function. Most of the things you do, even if they're unhealthy, still serve a function. Everything you do from a behavioral psychology perspective, everything you do for a specific reason. You just may not know what that reason is. Well, if the reason you're procrastinating is because you're afraid, when you stop being afraid, You don't need to procrastinate anymore.
In that sense, like procrastination is really a self-defense mechanism. But once you sit with that awareness and dive into it, you can realize like, hey, this defense mechanism is not necessary in this scenario, right? But I think, like you said, the only way to really get there is by, for example, visualizing about the worst case scenario of a new project, a new business, or even publishing a post. And this is actually something I do all the time. Whenever I start a new project and I feel some resistance towards it, towards getting started, I think of, okay, what's the worst thing that can really happen here? And that helps, like that clarifying it helps so much, because if not, it always stays this abstract monster of, ooh, bad things are going to happen. But if you just take a few minutes and visualize about, okay, what does that really look like? Failure in this scenario. Well, I'm still going to survive and it's probably not that bad. And I would just make these and these tweaks and then I'll get a better outcome. Like, it's not just like you make it real, your fear, but also at the same time, you're creating like a plan on how to actually prevent failure from happening, for example. I think that's a fascinating technique.
Yeah, because like you can also think about it like answering the rhetorical. So most people treat these questions like rhetoricals. Well, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if, what if, what if? And they never actually answer them. They just let it stay a rhetorical. What if people judge me? Actually answer that question. What if people do judge you? What if you're not smart enough to do this? Okay, probably means you need to learn something, right? Like answering these questions rather than allowing them to stay a rhetorical, that is a really good way to move forward. But like even something like going back to imposter syndrome. Fundamentally, imposter syndrome is a belief you don't belong in the room. Okay. What if you don't belong in that room? Meaning, what if people in that room will judge you from entering that room? That's your worst case scenario happening. Okay, let's play that out. Is that actually a room you want to be in? Like, do you want to go into a room where everybody's just a bunch of assholes and they're going to judge you? Probably not, right? But then you're like, oh, no, like the people in this room, like they're good people. Okay. Then what is the likelihood they're going to judge you? Oh, okay, it's actually probably pretty low. Okay. Right. And just thinking through these things that most of us spend our entire lives avoiding facing, that's a real unlock for a lot of people.
So really getting clear on the what ifs. And this kind of reminds me of one of the things that actually, it was years ago when I first started writing on Medium. I kind of had like, I had some trouble with like, okay, if I write about these things about my personal life and kind of like the self-improvement habits that I was really into, I'm afraid people will judge me. And then I really looked into like, okay, but who will judge me? Well, if it's random strangers on the internet, I don't actually care about that. That's fine. You can judge me all you want. I don't know you. Okay, but then who am I afraid of? Is it my friends? I was like, well, not my best friend, not my girlfriend, not really my family. And I actually boiled it down to like one person from high school who I was like barely in touch with. I was like, if that's actually the person that I'm kind of like, that this fear is stemming from, if that person will read my article, then that will embarrass me in some way or another. So this whole thing of like fear of being ridiculed, or like, yeah, I would say fear of ridicule in that sense, came actually from one person. That was kind of crazy.
Well, and dude, that's a good point, because a lot of us have really weird internalized voices. So like, as you just go through life, you pick up other people's voices. So maybe you had a really good mentor. So then when you're stressed out or seem overwhelmed, that mentor's words kind of come up and kind of help calm you down, give you some guidance, direction, whatever. But you also may have a really critical parent or a really bad boss or a crazy ex or something that their words now echo around in your head. The issue for a lot of us, though, is we forget the source of these words. Meaning, at a certain point, these criticisms and negative words from your boss basically seep into your head. So now the words are here, but you've forgotten where those words came from. So now you start repeating those words in your own voice until eventually you think these words are your own. I suck. I'm not good enough. Who am I to do this? Because you've forgotten that those words didn't originate from you. They came from somebody outside of you. So you've forgotten the source of these words. So now you think they are your own. So now you're battling yourself, right? That's the thing, is like learning to recognize, where did this belief come from? Where did this thought come from? Oh, it actually didn't come from me. It came from this other person, right? Because it's like you said with your high school friend. Some of these criticisms probably came from them initially, because that's the reason you were afraid that they might judge you, is because they were judgmental, right? So it's like, what were the words that maybe you could have potentially carried around with you for 10, 20 years and not even realized, oh, these aren't my words. These are somebody else's. I've been repeating to myself for years. That's another unlock, like learning like trying to, and even if you can't like remember the actual source, trying to recognize, these aren't my words. These aren't my beliefs. These are inherited beliefs that I can choose to let go of.
Because then they lose their power, right? If you can kind of disarm them in that way. This is not necessarily my belief. It came from somewhere, and you can maybe pinpoint that to the exact person or scenario, but maybe not. But then still realizing, like, wait, this is not my script. This is not my thoughts and beliefs. That completely disarms it. Now, Corey, you work with like a lot of the top creators. Do you find that they struggle with these same things, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, fear, or do they struggle typically in their mindset with other things?
So the reason I originally called these the 4 horsemen of fear was that I looked back and identified what are the most common limiting beliefs that damn near everybody seems to struggle with, whether they're just beginning their creator journey, they're aspiring to be a writer, they haven't even really written a whole lot yet, all the way up to best-selling authors. Same thing with YouTube, podcast, everything, business, everything else. And most limiting beliefs fell into one of 4 categories, which were fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of uncertainty, fear of success. So yes, these continue throughout our lives, throughout our journeys. But the reason, which is actually why, like, you can learn to see fear as more of a positive, is that, so when I had a regular job, quote unquote, 9 to 5, I clocked in, clocked out, collected, my salary check, whatever. If I clocked out and the clinic burned down in the middle of the night, I wouldn't give a shit as long as my check kept coming. I never was really afraid of failing or what other people would think. Cause I'm like, I'm just here to collect a check. Like, I do a good job, but if the paycheck quit coming, so would I, right? I wasn't particularly invested in that particular line of work. But as soon as I started this creator thing, now all the horsemen came up one at a time. They tag teamed, they cycled, they ganged up, all this stuff, right? And what I learned, both with myself and a lot of people I work with, is the reason they come up is because you are emotionally invested in the work that you're doing. So because you give a shit about what you're doing, you care about putting these ideas out into the world, you care about sharing yourself, you care about serving this specific group of people, or talking on these specific topics, or sharing these interests, these obsessions, whatever. You really, really care. But because of that, this feels important, which means the stakes feel a lot higher. And because of that, that's when all of these insecurities come up, because it's basically saying, like, I'm pouring so much of myself into this. What if it isn't good enough? What if it fails? Or what if people judge me for exposing my most authentic self to the world? Or what if I put in all this effort in order to succeed, but success actually sucks somehow? Okay. That is why these fears come up, is because often they are indicative that you are on a path that resonates with you, that you are deeply emotionally invested in. So for me, like, that's why you continue to see these at all levels, if the person is doing something they actually care about, right? Because some people don't necessarily. But that's why they keep coming up, because you're continuing to push yourself. You're continuing to raise the stakes. You're continuing to do values aligned work, building businesses that are deeply meaningful and impact obviously your own life, but the people you care about, both, loved ones, but also audience and things. That's why these fears come up. It is a good thing. The issue is most of the time we avoid the path that seems fearful, that has fear on that path. That's really the issue. Like, fear isn't the issue. Your avoidance of fear is the issue.
That's really fascinating, because in that sense, it's also freeing, right? Because now it's no longer something to avoid. It's not a bug. It's like a feature. It's actually a signal that, hey, very likely what I'm working on right now, or whatever goal I'm pursuing right now, means a lot to me, and I should actually be pursuing it. And these fears or feelings of imposter syndrome are like a sign that I'm on the right path. I think as well, like in Stephen Pressfield, right, calls it resistance. And he says that resistance is usually strongest with those pursuits that mean the most to us. And that's such a freeing way to look at it, where it's no longer, hey, I don't have to fix this. Like, that doesn't mean I can let this stop me from moving forward. No, but you don't have to fix the actual thing. There's nothing wrong with you in that sense. It's becoming aware that it happens, and like moving with it instead of trying to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and just, for everybody watching or listening, like, just think about your own life. Think about every time you ever leaned in to fear and how things worked out. And think about every time you have shied away from something that was terrifying. Every time you've become resentful or you had wishful thinking of what could have been was because you're like, if I go left, that's where fear is. If I go right, fear's not there. I will go right. How's that working out for you? Probably not particularly well. But every time you're like, well, fear is on the left path, I'm going to go down the left path. How'd that work out for you? Probably pretty decently. Because if nothing else, even if it doesn't, quote unquote, work out the way you envisioned it to, you don't have the regret because you know what was down that path, right? Like, what was it, Bronnie Ware, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying? She's like a palliative care nurse, and she worked with a bunch of, people on their deathbeds. And she was like, look, these are the top 5 regrets, but most of them boiled down to, I didn't live the life I wanted. I wasn't intentional with how I spent my time. I let fear and fear avoidance hold me back from doing the things I deeply wanted to do. And now that I'm at the end, I can't fix that. There's nobody to apologize to make amends to. There's no way to fix what I didn't do. 20 years ago, I didn't take that other path. I didn't start the business. I didn't change jobs. I didn't go after that person, whatever, I didn't write that book, whatever it was. I can't undo something I never did in the first place. There's no corrective action to take. But if you go down that path, you're like, okay, it didn't work out, but I am at least proud of myself that I made the attempt, because there's no more what ifs. I know what would happen because I went down that path. I learned it. Oh, I made a mistake. Well, that is a mistake that I can fix because I did something. Now I can course correct it because I have momentum. I took that chance. I went down that path. But if I never went down that path, I can't course correct. There's no way for me to fix it because there's nothing that I did in the first place. You can't fix a zero, basically.
Now, Corey, you also talk about giving yourself permission to be great. What does it mean to give yourself permission to be great?
So, for example, like in Buddhism, I'm not a Buddhist, but my passing understanding of Buddhism is the whole idea of like becoming a Buddha or like Buddha nature, enlightenment. Sometimes people think about it like you don't become a Buddha. You already are one. You just piled up a bunch of shit on top of that. So with a lot of Buddhism, it isn't about adding and becoming something new. It's about removing everything that you've piled on top. Kind of like chiseling marble, right? Or like, what was it, like Michelangelo or whoever it was, like, oh, I saw the angel in the marble or whatever it was. Like I saw what was beneath the marble, and then I just
Removed
chiseled
it.
away at the marble. Yeah, until I got to that point. That's sort of how I see it, in that I think that we inherently are great. But as, just throughout life, whether it is conditioning, family, society, just the human condition of insecurity, whatever it is, we pile on so many limiting beliefs and false assumptions and unrealistic expectations and waiting for, outsourcing our agency, waiting for other people to give us permission to do the thing. I think that we are naturally great, but we hold ourselves back from being great for so many reasons, right? Because even fear of failure, that's you getting in your own way. Well, what if this doesn't work out? Okay, if you didn't have that thought, you wouldn't be sabotaging yourself. Like it's in your head. Well, what if I'm not smart enough? Okay, the person beside you who went and did the thing, either they didn't have that thought in the first place, or they had the thought and decided to do it anyway. Again, it isn't the outside world most of the time. It's you getting in your own way. And man, I've spent 6 months before working with high-level founders on a single question, which is, what do you want? Because they couldn't answer the question. Every time I asked it, they were like, well, this is what I can do. This is what I could do. This is what I have done. This is what I should do. This is what society expects me to do. I was like, no, what do you want? And 6 months plus working on that singular question, all because they were getting in their own way. They weren't giving themselves permission to admit what they actually wanted because they didn't trust their own judgment. We are naturally great, but we get in our own way when it comes to our own greatness. That is my thing of stop waiting for permission to be great. Stop waiting for somebody else to tell you it's okay to try that thing, or for somebody else to tell you you're a good writer, or you're smart enough, or you can succeed, or you are helping people. All of that should be icing on the cake. All of that should be just a bonus, but you have to validate yourself first. You have to trust yourself first. You have to respect yourself first and have conviction that the thing you're doing is worth doing. That is my thing of you are naturally great, but you are getting in your own way. You are piling on all this other baggage, expectations, whatever, that is preventing you from being great. So rather than trying to become great, remove the things keeping you from greatness.
Now, Corey, one last question for you, and this is a question I ask everyone on the podcast. If you could go back in time to your younger entrepreneurial self, what are 3 lessons or insights you would share with your younger entrepreneurial self?
Well, so I've been an entrepreneur for 4.5 years at this point. So I'm still actually fairly early on. But what I've learned is entrepreneurship isn't a single player game. I love single player games. I much prefer them to every other kind. But entrepreneurship doesn't work that way. So one, entrepreneurship at a high level for people who are actually succeeding, one, it isn't a single player game. Nobody's doing it alone. But there's also not competition. Not in the way that you think. Okay? Most of the time, collaboration is how you actually succeed. Collaboration is how you succeed early on, because then you get, for example, let's just take social media and shit. If you have a small audience, collaborating with somebody with a bigger audience puts you in front of their audience. They share some of their trust. So the trust they built with their audience, some of that gets transferred over to you. So now their audience trusts you because you're there by association. But at a higher level, as you become more successful, collaborations are how you all can share resources, can pool your ideas, your skills, all these other things. So collaboration is key. It is not a single player game. For too long, I tried to just brute force it by myself.
Yeah, me too.
Because I'm a solopreneur. That means I have to be fully alone. And it's no, you can be a solopreneur. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you have to be alone, isolated. That's the biggest piece. Second piece is, rather than trying to find the latest hack or the trend or whatever the fuck the meta is on a given platform or whatever the algorithm's pushing, look at what is timeless, right? Like, Jeff Bezos talks about with Amazon, right? Like, what are the things that don't change, right? People want selection. They want options. They want fast shipping, and they want cheaper prices. Everything else is secondary to those three things. So with, creator stuff, what doesn't change? People love stories. People love authenticity. People love feeling like they know you. How can you do more of that? How can you share more of yourself with the world? And how can you tell the stories only you can tell? How do you create the content only you could create? Right? So putting more of yourself out there, creating the content only you could create, that's my second really big piece. And that often comes down to timeless things. I guess it's more of a compound thing. That'll be my three. Focus on timeless things that don't change. Create the content only you could create. And collaborate rather than treating it like a single player game. Those are three things I have learned very much the hard way. And when I finally accepted them, shit started feeling not easy, but way easier.
That's the whole thing about entrepreneurship. You can be listening to these lessons and like, oh yeah, that's important, but sometimes you have to learn them the hard way to truly integrate. I've definitely been there, Corey. Like I've been creating playing entrepreneurship like a solo game for far too long, and until I realized and even though I was a solopreneur, now I have a team, right, with Sinem and Philip. But that doesn't mean I have to do everything by myself and completely take the lonely road. Just like surround yourself with other entrepreneurs, do cool stuff together, collaborate. Even a podcast like this is like an example of collaborating, right? And it makes the process way more fun and far more effective than doing it solo.
Yeah, and if you think anytime you've struggled to some degree, either is because you were trying to do it alone, you were getting caught up in the latest algorithm change rather than focusing on timeless things. Or you were trying to be somebody that you're not. You were trying to fit it into the template, or you're trying to do something that ChatGPT could have written for you or whatever, rather than sharing the things only you could share. A lot of the times we've all struggled as creators. Most of them are related to one of those three things.
Corey, where should people go if they want to learn more about what you do?
Corey Wilks, Psy.D.com. So my doctorate is a Psy.D, a doctor of psychology. I am Corey Wilks, Psy.D, P-S-Y-D. I'm Corey Wilks, Psy.D, all over the internet. I've got a podcast called Creator Alchemy. You can find that on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. But my website, my newsletter, all of my socials, just type in Corey Wilks, Psy.D, and you'll find me.
We'll link to all of that in the show notes as well, so people can easily check it out. Corey, thanks so much, man, for being on the podcast. You shared so many valuable insights with us here today.
Dude, this was great. I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.